Hey, it's Soul, giving you guys the World of Warcraft, and today we're going to talk about Protection Paladins in the 7.15 patch. There we go. As always, with any PTR related video, any and all of the information you hear could be outdated as soon as tomorrow, since it's taken me like 6 days to come up with this video. But don't worry, because hopefully the concepts and ideas from this build will carry over to future ones, and even if we're kind of off by some numbers here and there, you're still going to get an idea of how Protection Paladins are going to look when the patch drops. So unlike other specs, Protection Paladins aren't going to have a big sweeping revamp or a huge change to their rotation, but let's go over some of these changes. First off, let's do talents, and we'll start off with Blessed Hammer, which is getting nerfed from a 15% damage reduction whenever it hits a target down to 12%. At the same time, Holy Shield is getting a pretty well needed buff. It's going to go from 10% additional block to 15%. Going down a couple tiers to Aegis of Light, that skill is going to have a cooldown reduced. Right now it's at 5 minutes, it's going to go down to 3 minutes. So it's pretty clear that Blizzard is trying to take some of these talents and try to make them a little bit more attractive to players whenever they look at these trees. They look at Blessed Hammer, for example, and it's like, duh, it's so damn good that you might as well take it. As for what I think about the Blessed Hammer and Holy Shield changes, I don't think it's quite enough to make Holy Shield a very attractive talent. As it is right now and in the future, at least the way that I see Holy Shield, I see it more as a PvP kind of thing. There aren't a lot of instances where in raids or in like mythic dungeons where you're going to be taking advantage of Holy Shield. Ideally, you want to silence them or stun, caster mobs and things like that. You just don't want to get hit. Even in situations where you're going to take a lot of constant spell damage, it just doesn't quite compare to being able to reduce melee attacks by 12 to 15% pretty much all the time. Being able to block still isn't quite enough. I mean, it's a nice kind of way to damage smooth, but it's nothing compared to just popping your Shield of the Righteous. What it does kind of sort of do is a little interesting, at least on the higher gear scale. When you inevitably want to get a little bit less haste, which I know is like blasphemy, right? And though I'm not a theory crafter, I don't even use sims because in my opinion, they're not very effective when it comes to tanking. You can't sim someone screwing up, and my job as a tank is to save people whenever they do screw up. Anyway, the thing about Holy Shield is that it makes a heavy mastery build maybe a little bit more viable. Of course, in instances where it's only like physical damage, you're probably not going to want Holy Shield, but it gives you something to think about when considering mobs that like dual wield or just hit you hella fast, and that's definitely one situation where Blessed Hammer just isn't going to work right, since that 12% debuff only works on the next auto attack, so that would be one thing to consider. But anyway, to sum things up, Holy Shield makes it a little bit more attractive, but just not enough yet. But maybe at higher levels it'll be more attractive, so we'll just kind of have to wait and see. As for Aegis of Light though, I still don't find it a very cool skill. The biggest reason is because I have to stand still the whole damn time. Judgment of Light is easy. All you gotta do is throw it and ta-da, you're supporting your team. Consecrated Ground has a niche. I mean, the heal isn't really worth anything, but the snare is. Aegis of Light seems useful. It's kind of like a Disc Priest bubble dome thingamajig, but it's restricted to the Paladin and people have to position themselves and get behind them. It's very, very situational, and you have to consider your team's proximity, standing still for 6 seconds, possibly getting knocked back, and even on a 3-minute cooldown, it just doesn't quite seem great. Now for the areas where it is useful, now it's even more useful because of the reduced cooldown. So maybe the buff to Aegis of Light isn't really meant to make it more attractive compared to the other talents in that tree, but simply to buff it so that it is usable more than once per rating counter, for example. So we'll go over stats just really quick because these coefficients and things like that, they seem to be changing like all the time. So what we're seeing is a change in the coefficient where we basically need more stat to get more effect, but at the same time it's being rebalanced so that we're getting more stats on our gear. As of this build, and when comparing it onto the live servers, I seem to have 1% less haste and 1% more parry. Part of this seems to come from the fact that all gear has been given kind of a 5 item level bump. Like everything has a little bit more strength, a little bit more stamina, so I have a teeny little bit more health, and the additional strength probably contributed to what my parry looks like right now, but it looks like the ratings are still at a point where I have a little bit less than what I have on live. But again, there's no need to panic or feel reassured about these changes so far. They can change at any time before the patch comes out. Paladins now have 2 more pieces of legendary gear to try and fail to get. One's a pretty awesome trinket that gives both strength, versatility, and mastery, which are all pretty good things. Don't don't cry too much about not having haste in it, for the reason that I talked about with Holy Shield, because it might work, you know? It has an on-use skill that's going to take 50% of your maximum life and turn it into a bubble, and once that bubble expires or you know, the enemies go through it, 75% of that bubble is going to explode and deal damage to surrounding enemies, and it'll be the damage is shared. It also doesn't share a cooldown with similar trinkets, so you can pop two things at the same time, which is pretty nice. The bubble is nice, the damage is nice, the cooldown is short enough to be nice. It's nice. By contrast though, the helmet is broken. It's so awesome. At least, well, in my opinion, it's totally awesome. What it's going to do, it's going to take our self heal and it's going to add an additional charge as well as reduce the cooldown by 10%, which isn't as huge of a deal. It basically knocks off another second or so if you have a decent amount of haste. But having the two charges is freaking amazing, and here's why. As you folks may know, pally tanking is kind of like living on the edge. There's some little tiny bubbles that we have with our Bulwark of Order, whatever that's called, and that cute little heal over time that we get from our artifact. But by and large, we live and die from proper usage of our Hand of the Protector, Light of the Protector, depends on what you spec for. And with the way that it heals, you basically want to make sure that your health is as low as you can tolerate before you pop the thing. Having the second charge gives you a ton more flexibility as to when you want to pop your skill, as opposed to popping a defensive skill like your Eye of Tyr, your Ardent Defender, your Guardian thing. And you also got to consider the tier set for pallies, because we're pretty much at the stage of the expansion where now we get to start thinking about, hey, what's our tier? And here it is, just in case you forgot. The 2 set is whatever, but the 4 set is what's really going to make this legendary shine. Just like how we have charges with Shield of the Righteous and Judgment can influence the cooldown of that skill, the 4 set bonus has a pretty high chance of giving us another charge or recharging our something of the Protector. So if you want to go nuts and spec yourself to have a super high availability of your self heal, you just gotta spec for Righteous Protector and Hand of the Protector so you can have a really short cooldown on refreshing that skill, and you'll have it available pretty much whenever you want. Having the legendary also gives you the flexibility to spec out of those skills in case you wanted to kind of balance yourself in other areas, like if you wanted to do more DPS with Seraphim, if you wanted to tank a whole bunch of things and hold on to Last Defender, and so on and so forth. The legendary just frees up a lot of room and, well, reduces a lot of stress. Of course, you gotta get the helmet first, and good luck. And that's it. There aren't any huge or sweeping changes to us. Overall, I'm still a happy tank, and I'd better be, you know, this many years later. But let me know your guys' thoughts, or more importantly, anything that I might have missed. I leave the floor open to fellow Protection Paladins so you can bitch about having a low health pool and how Retribution Aura really sucks, like Nomi. Nomi sucks. But we'll see what happens in the next build. Like and sub, and stay breezy.